it is helpful to understand the origin of that word. Republic comes from the Latin res publica, which means public things. Now that means this, the republic belongs to us, the citizenry. It doesn't belong to corporations. It doesn't belong to special interests. It doesn't belong to political parties. And above all, it does not belong to a professional political class separate from the government. Now the word politics is connected to the ancient Greek term polis, that is the ancient Greek city-state. Classical Greek polis were self-governing entities, where to be a citizen meant that one had some say-so over the policies that impacted your life. One of the things that characterized ancient Greek city-states was that their citizenry placed a role in determining, or excuse me, I should say, played a role in determining the course of their communities. This is what separated the Greeks from those that they called the barbarians. You know, for them, barbarians were those who simply followed the dictates of kings, had a separate governing class. And this is one of the problems in the current political climate. We are creating a governing class that is daily becoming more and more separate from those that it governs. And what's the result of all this? Well, I've done enough talking for a second. I'll talk a little bit more in just a little bit, but let me ask you guys this. How many people in here, I picked a bad night for this, I got to explain this. Tonight's also the district-wide parent-teacher conference, so I may not get any hands to come up. But how many of you guys are either elementary or secondary teachers or related to an elementary or secondary teacher? Anybody? Raise your hands high. Okay? Let me ask you this. Compared to a few years ago, how much time do you have to prepare for your students' actual education? How much time do you have? Is it more or less? How much less?
Much less.
A lot less. Well, what are you spending your time doing?
I don't anymore. I'm retired, but I can tell you, my friends spend a whole lot of time either testing or recording or meetings or learning something supposedly that's new
That's it.
that didn't do a bit of good.
That's it. What we have is we have a political class who feels the need to do something. Now notice, it's not that they see a problem and want to fix it. They just feel the need to do something. And so one of the easy things, why don't we have education reform? That's a way of saying they're going to screw it up. Let me ask you this. How many educators are in the Oklahoma State Legislature? Well, I don't know that any of them are, because really if you're a teacher, you can't run for it. It's called the conflict of interest, is what they say. Gee, that's kind of funny, because the legislature writes laws, but there's sure a lot of lawyers up there. Okay, let me ask you this. Second question. Another problem we see. How many medical doctors or spouses of medical doctors or family members of medical doctors do we have in here tonight? Raise your hand. A few, well, we got two. Okay, sorry. Okay. And compared, sorry, I'll grab this. Let's see. Compared to a few years ago, how much time do doctors have to spend with their patients? Less. And again, who sets this policy? That can be both state, or more likely, that's a federal problem. Take a look at the background of most U.S. senators. Now, Coburn was a doctor, is a doctor. Okay, I'll give you that. But how many other legislators at the national level do you know that are doctors? Take a look at the background of most U.S. senators and see how many are in truth professional politicians. That is, for the vast majority of their careers, is all they've done is politics. That's it. Check it. Check this stuff out. Don't take my word for it. There are exceptions, but that's just it. They're the exceptions. They're not the rule. The rule are professional politicians. Now, take, for example, one of my main challengers. Because why run if there are already good choices out there? Well, I've decided they're not. So take one of my main challengers for this position that I'm running against, T.W. Shannon. Google up his biography. Don't believe a word I tell you tonight. Look this stuff up on yourself, okay? But Google up his bio. He started out as a field representative for one congressman, then he became a field representative for another congressman, then he became a state representative, and then at the ripe old age of 35, he became the Speaker of the House. Now, it's true that Mr. Shannon's bio does contain some experience in the private sector. According to one of the things that I read, he operates a home-based public relations business. Great. Professional politician and part-time PR guy. I'm sure you can sell yourself, Mr. Shannon. Now, Take, for example, other politicians around here on the positive side. One's not here tonight, but I'll throw this out in his favor. And how many of you know Ron Justice? Okay? Ron Justice, on the other hand, spent an entire career in agriculture before he ever ran for political office. He retired before he ran for political office. And so by the time he held office in a largely rural district, he had practical experience dealing with the issues that face rural Americans. That's the way politics is supposed to operate. We have tonight, where do you go? Jim, where are you? Oh, there you are, okay. We have tonight Jim Weir. Jim Weir spent 30 years in law enforcement before he ever ran for sheriff. So he had a little practical experience first. Now, members of the press keep asking me, well, what experience do you have? Or some just list me as that candidate who has never held office. So what experience would I bring to the scene? Well, first of all, like most of you here tonight, I have had to face the consequences of other people's policies all my adult life. In other words, I've had to eat a lot of food, but I've never acquired a taste for it. So I am intimately aware that if you elect me as your U.S. Senator, the legislation that I vote on will have an impact on real lives and real livelihood. That is, the decision of people in the legislature impact people. I'm aware of that. Why am I aware of that? Well, look, at the end of the month, my wife and I are lucky if we have a couple of $100 in the bank account, and it's not because we're spendthrifts. How many does that sound familiar to? Raise your hands if that's familiar to you. Now, some of you are thinking, you got a couple of $100. Well, you knew that's why you're running as a Republican. You're a fat cat. Okay, so anyway, but now, the thing is, policymakers and administrators of all type like to brag about bold policy directives that they intend to pursue. They like to say stuff like, we're facing a crisis and it is not time to be timid. Well, that sounds really nice if I've got $1 million in my bank account, but if you're living paycheck to paycheck, that's a different story. Roy Rogers used to say, be brave, but never take chances. Well, if you elect me to the Senate, I will continue to be brave, but when it comes to your lives and your livelihood, I'm not taking any chances. Practical terms. Well, first of all, I will never be rushed into using working people's tax revenue to save the skins of those who have gambled away their corporation's wealth. Second of all, I will endeavor to never transfer wealth of working Americans to multinational corporations who have no homeland and consequently have no patriotism. Similarly, I will never vote to put the lives of our brave servicemen at risk on foreign fields unless our nation is directly threatened. The job of the American Armed Forces is to protect this country, not to fight for someone else's freedom, and certainly not to pick a winner in a confused civil war. Anyway, the primary concern of an elected official in a republic must be the well-being of the citizens of that republic. That said, I now want to turn my attention to the other major candidate in the race, James Lankford. You're thinking, well, why are you running, Crow? It's like I said, got problems with him. Now, ever since 2008, and in fact, for a little bit longer than that, American workers have faced serious economic difficulties. Among other things, it should be the job of an American senator to alleviate, as best he can, the plight of American workers. Or at the very least, not make the situation worse. Okay? At the very least, just don't make it worse. Now, it doesn't matter whether that citizen can trace his ancestors to the American Revolution, or if he's a member of a Native American tribe and has been here long before we white people got here, okay? Doesn't matter. Or whether that citizen is a first-generation American. If they have their citizenship for the last 6 months. It doesn't matter then. Nor does it matter whether that citizen is black, whether that citizen is white, of Asian descent, or Latino. That's not important either. Whatever the case, For an American senator, the interest of American citizens, of American workers, must come before the interest of the cheap labor advocates who continually push for an amnesty that will create over 10 million competitors for American workers in this struggling job market. Now, Mr. Langford will parse words, and he'll tell you, well, I'm not for an amnesty. Go to his own website then, and why does he put up these apologetic letters all the time? Check his own website out, not my stuff, his own stuff. And look how he always tries to apologize. He seems to be hedging his bets to me. He wants to say, well, it's not really to do with this. Let me say this. I will not hedge my bets. I will not support an amnesty, not immediately. I will not over a 4-year period of time. I will not over a 10-year period of time. Is that clear enough? Early in this announcement speech, I mentioned how in 1999, the Clinton administration pushed through the repeal of the Glass-Steagall Act that separated commercial banks, that is savings and loans, from investment firms, banks that traded and underwrote stocks, and basically put these types of banks in the gambling business. You know what happens with gamblers? You're always going to lose eventually, okay? Well, after the financial crisis of 2008, Congress temporarily wised up and sought to force banks to put most of the risky trades outside of the bank into separately capitalized subsidiaries where losses would not be guaranteed by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. The problem is, last October the 29th, check this out on your own. Because what got me with it was I didn't see this on ABC, I didn't see it on NBC, I didn't see it on CBS, I didn't see it on MSNBC, I didn't see it on our savior Fox News. I didn't see it on any of these. So-called liberals, so-called conservatives. I didn't see it on any of these. You'll have to check this out on your own. Actually, I saw it reading an article in Market Watch and had nothing to do with political policy. It was just mentioned in passing. I thought, that's interesting. And so I looked it up myself. Well, last October the 29th, a bill passed with the support of James Langford that would allow the banks to trade almost all complex derivatives without quarantining them in any separate affiliate. Ultimately, what this means is it set us up for another financial meltdown. At least as bad as 2008, if not worse. Thanks again, Mr. Langford, for looking after the working people and taxpayers of this country. It's time to go. It's time to go. And it's sure the hell not time to be in the Senate. One of the key assumptions that most of the Founding Fathers held was that for this republic to endure, it needed to be led by people of practical experience, not political, professional politicians, I should say. Let me give you an example. Washington, George Washington, my favorite Founding Father. George Washington, he served 2 terms and he said, I'm not going to do this to you. Now when he said this, he didn't say because I'm tired. He wanted to do it. You know, Washington had an ego, okay? He's not the perfect guy, but he understood he had an ego. And he understood that for the good of the republic, he only needed to serve 2 times. Now, if he wanted to, he could have been president for life. He could have stayed forever. But he didn't do it. Why? Not because he didn't want to, but why? Because it was bad for the republic. Now, that's what it means to be a citizen politician, not to stay forever. You don't say, well, I got to stay a little bit longer so I can see it through. You never see it through. Nothing ever ends. There's never a peaceful time. You've got to learn your limitations. Now, within a few decades of American independence, most of Latin America gained its independence from Spain and Portugal. That is, we have Colombia, Mexico, Venezuela, Brazil. All these places gained their independence. And you can look at the founding fathers of these places, that is, the great heroes of Latin American Revolution. People like Simón Bolívar, okay? These are decent men. These are men with lofty ideas. And lo and behold, when they gained their independence, they copied their constitution after our constitution. What happened though? Well, these guys thought, well, you know, to make sure everything goes smoothly, we probably need to stay in power a little bit. We need, and you know, these guys are Republicans, little r's. And they're thinking, we need to stay in so we can preserve democracy. And so it all became that it was dependent on them. And so what happened to every single country in Latin America within a few decades? Dictatorships. The difference between Bolívar and Washington was not that Washington was a more moral man than Bolívar. Bolívar may have been a more moral man than Washington. But the difference was Washington knew human vice, and he knew that having a professional political class is not good. That was the difference, and so he stepped down. Now, some of you, I believe that T.W. Shannon, I believe he's a good, moral man. But as his record demonstrates, he is a professional politician. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're thinking, well, now, Crow, where's your party loyalty? Remember the Republican First Commandment, large R. Remember the Republican First Commandment, thou shalt not speak against a fellow Republican. Let me assure you this, I am a conservative, make no mistake about it. But a candidate should not be judged on his party loyalty, but his loyalty to the citizens he serves. So in conclusion, if I win, what am I going to do? Am I going to fix Washington? No. Now that may surprise people. They're thinking, wait a minute, you're not going to fix it? You're supposed to say you're going to fix it, you're going to clean it up. No, I'm not going to start my campaign by lying to you. I'm not a very good liar, and I'm too old to start becoming a good liar. Is the economy going to improve or foreign policy become more rational? I don't know. So what good am I? Well, first of all, I will work for the people of Oklahoma and put them first. I can't say that. Second of all, I will remind politicians in Washington to whom they are accountable, which is going to make a lot of people mad on both sides of the aisle.
Yeah.
And lastly, in the 2 or 8 years that I have the privilege of serving this state, because I'm not going to be a professional politician, I'm running for this one to finish out this 2-year term. If I win, I will run again in 2 years for that 6-year term. And then that's it for the U.S. Senate. If 8 years is good enough for Washington, it's good enough for me. What am I going to do? Well, I'm not a professional politician. I'm a teacher. That's what I am. I'm a teacher going into politics. And I intend to keep teaching when I'm a senator. What do you mean? In school? No. What I mean is by example. I want to show what it means to be a citizen politician, not a professional politician. And so after those 8 years, or 2 years if you get mad at me, after those 8 years, I'm out. I'm out. I don't know why anybody would want to stay in Washington more than 8 years. I am not the man on a white horse who has come to save the republic. I am no Caesar. Any republic where people are truly in need of a man on a white horse to fix all their problems is no longer one made up of free people and is consequently doomed. All that I am is a man who knows his duty, will step aside when his time has passed, and will place his trust in the free men and free women who come afterwards. Now, if what I've said tonight resonates with you, I would appreciate your vote and your support in the Republican primary in June, and also the general election in November.